Like, I remember I got a phone call from a woman in Minneapolis about 3 years ago. She was from the largest senior community in Minneapolis. And I was a little puzzled why she was calling, because I thought she was calling about the seniors actually in her community, because I think a couple thousand seniors live there. And these people are rather elderly, 80 plus, some of them had dementia. And she's like, no, Adam, that's not what I was calling about. What I was calling about is the children of these folks who are actually buying the apartments and condominiums for their aging parents. And she said, well, actually, they're U.S. citizens, they're male, female, and they're in their early 40s. And so we looked at the numbers, and it turned out that 8% of her customers were actually social customers, because that's the stat on Americans, or actually it's 83%, it's a little higher. So you really have to think, who's the person that's writing the check for your goods or services, and look closely at those numbers.
So I have a question. So I see a lot of advertising, or I hear a lot of advertising nowadays about this service called Reputation Builder. And so essentially that's somebody taking one aspect of internet noise, and basically they're overlaying internet noise on top of negative comments. What's your feeling on that kind of strategy versus sort of a more proactive approach?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I've seen a number of these reputation management companies, and they give you stats that okay, there's, let's say, 20% of the world is on a social networking site. And, Facebook by itself is approaching 1 billion users very quickly. So yeah, I think it's realistic that 18 to 20% of the globe will be on just Facebook alone within probably by Christmas of this year. And so yeah, you have these firms that claim to be reputation management. And yeah, effectively what they're doing is they're going out there, they're trying to find if there's negative content about your company or your your brand, and they're trying to repair the damage by putting out sort of, I guess you would say, noisy or ineffective content, when what I think you can really lead with is real content. There's a guy who's actually really an expert on this, just on reputation management. He's one of my favorite writers. His name's Andy Beal. He's based down in the South. He wrote that book called Radically Transparent. I would definitely check out Andy Beal's website. It's radicallytransparent.com. And that book, I think, is one of the best books about reputation management. My recommendation strategically, whether it's for a small business or a larger one, before you go out and hire some company to do this stuff for you, at least read Andy's book first. It'll take one day. And granted, Andy's book is a few years old, but the advice in it, I think, is somewhat timeless.
So extremely relevant.
So yeah, that's sort of, I would at least start there, or maybe go to andybeal.com, and that's really Andy's niche, is just online reputation management. He's been on CNN, the BBC, or New York Times, maybe not CNN, but just about every major pub. So I would take a look at that and spend a day looking at that before going out and spending $10,000 a month on a reputation management firm.
Yeah. It's interesting, especially now with with the online reviews and everything. Like Google, for example, finally just gave you the opportunity to go back and dispute anything that's put against you on your reviews. Whereas before, I mean, up to about 6 months ago, it was just take it or leave it. It was already there. It's nothing you could do about it, right?
Yeah, but that's potentially a mammoth task for Google. When you think about it. That's opening up a can.
It is, but there's a good reason for it. If businesses and companies don't feel that they can trust the largest online advertising companies in the world, who also happen to be search engines like Microsoft's Bing, Google, even there's websites in South Africa and China that like QQ, Renren, big companies. If they don't feel that they can trust them to give accurate search results, why would they feel comfortable spending their hard-earned advertising dollars there?
Yeah, no doubt.
So it's really a two-way street. And I mean, the whole thing with this reputation management that companies are concerned about, they don't really care that much about their reputations. They care about, their earnings before taxes. So, but they realize that, in the social customer world, if you don't have good stuff being said about you online and on mobile, then you're not really going to sell anything to anyone. I mean, just think of some of these companies right now. Like I remember, with Occupy Wall Street yesterday, Brookfield Properties, they own that whole plaza out there outside of Occupy, where I guess the Occupy Wall Street protesters are. They had an opportunity yesterday to use some pretty heavy-handed tactics, but they didn't. And I think one of the reasons is because the backlash against Brookfield Properties online, who have a lot of probably prospective deals and bids in the marketplace right now, would have been overwhelmingly negative. So I think from a a social media perspective, they kind of made the right step there. And also you have American Airlines just the other day. American Airlines had a flight that was having some trouble. There was a passenger who was yelling, and there was a doctor on board that had to sedate the passenger. American Airlines chose to disable Twitter during the flight, which I thought was a little bit strange. There's a number of articles about this online.
It happened. That's bordering censorship.
Yeah, it ran in Business Insider the other day. It's if you go to businessinsider.com and you type in American Airlines, I'm looking at the article here. I'm trying to see. They made some sort of response. They basically stated that they did and then they didn't, or there was no way it could have been blocked. Anyway, everyone on the flight was okay, thankfully. Yeah. But it was kind of a strange situation. So there's different ways to handle the social customer, both good and bad.
Oh, absolutely.
But these days, the reactions are usually very, very swift from the customer.
Absolutely. I mean, think about the whole thing with Kevin Smith when he had to buy 2 seats on what was it, Southwestern or whatever. Same sort of thing. The outlash from that was crazy.
Oh. Yeah, and I think it really did hurt Southwest's brand. On the other hand, they were a company, Southwest Airlines, that has been highly engaged with their customers even prior to social media. I'd say in terms of managing customer relationships from a high level, they've always been good at that. And I think because of their traction with their customer base, they rebounded rather quickly. Whereas had that been a different airline that didn't have sort of the previous, customer relationships, they would not have been able to rebound quite so quick.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think there's a classic example that keeps coming up in periodicals and books that I've gleaned is I think it was General Motors that came out with this. They were toying with this idea of using the crowdsourcing to promote one of their Tahoes or something like that. Do you remember that, Adam? And
yeah, there was some
totally backfired.
Yeah, I'm trying to find the.
It was the environmentalists. Didn't they get a hold of it and make fun of it? They would build your own commercial or something.
They didn't use the technology properly. So I think that's a segue into be careful how you use the technology because it can bite you as hard as it can lead you, right? Yeah. So that's obviously the importance of having somebody who knows what they're doing guide you into that world.
On the other hand, two major consumer brands like Doritos and Coca-Cola have had pretty wild success with the same concept. So, I think, it really lies in the strategy and execution in terms of how well they can do it. And at the end of the show, we're going to give away an online course that will help your company, kind of figure out, okay, if we want to do something with our social customers, how do we do it right and write the plan soundly before we launch
Absolutely.
it.
One of the questions I also was going to talk to you about was, the whole concept of social CRM. So as we were talking prior to the show, a lot of the people that come here are kind of small, medium-sized businesses or even people that are playing or working in those companies. Now, we also have people that show up from very large companies as well watching this stuff. But the concept of social CRM to people is a foreign concept, but when you kind of explain it, people, it's almost like the light goes off and you go, I get it, I understand it. Can you give kind of a high level on what it means? And then potentially we'll go into kind of, how you've come up with the 5 M's of social CRM and 22 cases of using it. And maybe what we'll talk about is just a marketing case and a sales case as to why it might be relevant for their world. So if you don't mind.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And one note about the use cases for social customer relationship management. I didn't actually come up with all of them. I came up with about 5 or 6 of them. Jeremiah Aoyang and Ray Wang, who used to both work at the Altimeter Group, they actually came out with the basic use cases, and I sort of took their model and added a lot of stuff to it.
And by the way, before you go into that, it's I'm looking on the book. I've got it marked here. It's page 54 is where it's laid out, and you do an awesome job of actually talking about this for literally almost 100 some odd pages just afterwards, going through the different cases. So it's a very compelling, intriguing read as well. So that's why I'm putting the book plug in, because I think it's really good to actually understand that concept here as well. So
yeah. When I wrote the book, I got sick of seeing so many theoretical books on social strategy. When I grew up listening to The Clash and Black Flag and Jawbreaker and a lot of punk bands. And I think, the thing that really inspired me was like, these bands, they weren't telling you to go to Hollywood and get a big recording studio. They were telling you, okay, do what we do, just do it yourself and do it in your garage. And, the band that did that the best, I think, that kind of woke up America was Nirvana. I remember, when Nirvana's Nevermind came out, I was 13 or 14. And I think everyone I knew started a band after that. And I'm sort of trying to get companies to look at this, to look at social customer relationship management and first ask themselves, well, do we want our brand to be a social object? Because that's kind of the first question you have to ask before you even decide, should we do social customer relationship management? It's on page 13. There's like a list of questions here. And some of the key questions are like, well, does our company want to talk to our customers immediately and directly without a third party intervening, like a television station or a journalist? And does our company want to be able to directly engage with our customers on a day-to-day basis? If the answer to that question is no, don't read my book. Go read Treasure Island, or go read, The Girl Who Caught the Fire. Like, I'm not going to be able to help you really. But that said, if the company wants to drive demand from their social customers on a daily basis, then yeah, absolutely. Keep rolling.
So go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. So, I mean, when people ask what is social customer relationship management, well, it's pretty simple. It's creating and monetizing the conversations with your customers and your prospective customers and the people in your company's market, and creating new markets in order to drive revenue and outcomes.